Tristan McGough here. Welcome. Today, as your philosopher at large, we're going to discuss something which has to do with the ultimate nature of reality and at the same time helps explain the process and the nature of change that we experience in our everyday lives. So today, we're going to look at the source of self-transformation and why there is something rather than nothing whatsoever. I'm not a reductionist in the sense that I try to explain all things by either one principle, one fact, one facet. Rather, what I've developed as a philosopher is an understanding of reality and that it has a recipe. And as a recipe, it has 4 essential ingredients, if you will. So it is not a reductionist model of one thing to the other, such as being to not being, and asking what is being or how can being come from nothing, which is, of course, a nonsensical question to begin with. Because when you ask yourself, why is there something rather than nothing, you're assuming both something and nothing are somehow resident or inhabit a there. Nothing is nothingness. It's no-thingness. It is an absence of all qualities, all conditions, all states, all understandings, all possibilities. Nothing means nothing. And you cannot, since it's a binary term, that is, nothing is the opposite of something or being, you can't explain both by reducing one to the other. You're not going to explain being by trying to explain it coming from nothingness through some wormhole or random event in vacuum. You could try, and it's a noble perspective to take. Any of our perspectives are, as we pursue science, as we pursue a knowledge of the finite particulars in this world and the universal laws that regulate them, it is a noble undertaking to attempt to clothe your perspective within a theoretical garb. And that's, of course, what I'm doing here. And as I've discussed the omniversal model before as the basis for omniversalism, today I'm going to explain to you a little bit of what the nature of reality is and the ground of reality in the process. The ground being this. If I were to take and say, well, there's got to be one model that best articulates the events we're involved in, the experiences that we have, I would say it is this one, the model of the aeon. So the aeon I see as a comprehensive model, an explanative device that can be used to penetrate the nature and the ground of reality. And the aeon for me is the one and only, all and everything of being, non-being, conscious being, and anything which is something. Now, not only is that a mouthful and a mindful, it leaves nothing out. Not even nothing. So first of all, if we are looking at the ingredients of the aeon, the ingredients of the aeon are fourfold. I do include non-being, abhava, or abhava. The aperion is unbounded being. That's pure being. We spoke of that before. It's the being that allows our connectedness. It's a being that allows us to exchange, not only communicatively through symbolic mechanisms and phonetic differentiations that are meaningful. But it is the basis of everything that becomes articulated into manifest forms, finite forms. These bounded beings, the particulars, and this is aletheia. It's a Platonic term, and it refers to non-disclosedness. It's undisclosedness. It is the opening to reality and to truth directly. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is disguised. It is vidya. It is seen directly without avidya, without putting in place something that's not there for something that is. I also include, besides abhava, the apeiron, aletheia, atma. Atma is conscious being. Now, if we were going to look at this, the aeon, and say, all right, this is the complete thing. But at the same time that it's the complete thing, it's also the single thing. It's the only thing. It's the one and only. So when I apply it to a particular individual as a microcosmic form of the entire universe, what I'm doing is simply applying the aeon to an individual instance of the aeon. The recipe for reality explains as well the nature of change. When we look at the aeon and we place it in the context of looking at everything all together as the one and all, this is the change that we want to explain. What's going on in terms of our changing experiences, the change we call events, the patterns we recognize as series of causation, the spans of time that we say are durable and that last together, such as even this session, or perhaps just this segment of the session where I'm explaining the recipe of reality with the fourfold ingredients. Change presupposes the changeless or non-being, and that is a definite absence. And I use that word definite because, of course, the definite, when we have something definite, such as this bottle of water, it is definited from all the other particulars. That is, this isn't my finger, is it? No, it's not. It's not my finger, right? And it's not your mind, and it's not my brain. It's not a lot of things. For whatever you want to say this particular is, it is not everything else. That's a lot of non-being packed into this bottle of water, isn't it? Non-being doesn't have residence where there is not being or being. Non-being is one of the ingredients that go to make up reality. It helps contour, define, carve out a particular from pure being. However, who does the carving? That's the changer. That's conscious being. That's Atma. Now, I use some rather peculiar language at times. You'll notice it's a fusion of Eastern and Western philosophical traditions. As you can tell here, Atma and Abhava are Sanskrit terms from the Eastern tradition. Apeiron and Aletheia are from the Western tradition. However, in order to bridge traditions, we can also refer to them in language that has no bearing whatsoever, but are neologisms, which are new words. New words packed with old meanings plus newly evolved meanings that have occurred in the history of thought. So, the apeiron we can refer to as trans-reality, because these are unchanging impartite being consisting of infinite universals. We'll get into more of this later. In the same way, on the other side is cis-reality. It's this reality of the finite world that we're all aware of. All the particulars. Everything here is part of cis-reality. It's all part of aletheia. It's what is undisclosed. It is immediate to itself. It is undivided in the sense that it is all interdependent. All the particulars are interdependent. And that interdependency can only be if there was a changeless non-being. Something that's a permanent absent, that does not being from becoming itself. If we were to think of this fist as being, and that it would move into this space where there is nothing at the moment, what if nothing were some kind of something? It presupposes how being is supposed to act. It limits being in some way. Well, that would be like another fist. That's being. Being contacting being. It's obstructed space. That's not what we're speaking about when we're speaking of de-reality. We're speaking of absences. We can refer to absences, which presuppose, in binary conceptualization, of course, presences. So what's present? In our recipe of reality, what's present and immediately apprehendable by the empiric self, of course, are all the particulars. The sounds, the sights, the smells, the taste, the sensibilities, such as equilibrium in this world, all of that, particular experiences. But as we know, every event has an interior. There is a conscious being that is the basis of its life, its love, its mind, its will, itself. Everything is a cosm in the sense that it is a self-contained aperture of being, conscious being, non-being, and particular being, finite being. If we were to look at these four quadrants very quickly, I'm going to put it in terms of a table, the four co-founding parameters of reality. This is quad being. You want to understand reality, you can't leave any of it out. You want your bread to rise, you better add the yeast. You need all four of these in order to create a complete aeon, reality as a whole. You need the ground of reality, which consists of conscious being and pure being. You need the nature of reality, which consists of non-being, abhava, as well as aletheia, particular being. It is non-being in these various facets that definitize and make pure being into partite being. Let's take a look, first of all. Let's review. Let's start off with Atma. We've been dealing with this from the beginning. Conscious being, that's what's being transformed. And so what we've been doing is experiencing, each of us as a self, our own aeonic parameters, if you will. So as a conscious being, we're the presence of Purusha, or spirit. And what is spirit? take Hegel's definition. Spirit is you becoming aware of the universe as it is becoming aware of itself through you. That's spirit. That's the luminosity of consciousness and the transparency of consciousness. The 5 bases of consciousness are the self, with its intuiting, and it is the center, of course, of experience. But when we say the center of experience, we're not talking about some permanent thing. We're not talking about a self as separate from any of these other elements that are the 5 bases of self. No more that we're talking about the aeon as being reduced to only conscious being, or the aeon being reduced to the void, or the aeon being reduced to pure being, or as some scientists like to do, reducing the aeon to nothing more than the finite particulars in this entity, cause, space, time continuum. 4 things. Entity, cause, space, time continuum. So with that, let's quickly go over. We've been studying this for the last number of sessions. We're on session 9, incidentally. We have the self with its intuiting, will, which is its intending, the willings that you have in life. Then, of course, mind with your thinking, the intelligence, and love, the heart, often called, which are your feelings, and of course your sentience. And your vivacience, which is life, and all the doings, all the power of your doings. Now let's take a look at its companion in the ground of reality. That is these things which are unmanifest, absolute, infinite, eternal, and uncaused. Nothing causes these. Nothing causes these. They're uncaused. They're always there. They're always, forever, in every situation or non-situation there. So, the companion, if you will, to the self is ontos, or pure being. That's the, if we want to look at it in terms of via negativa, the method of negation, we could look at being and say, being is the absence of non-existence. When we look at it positively, we say that ontos is being. In the same way that akala, which is the word for eternity, is an absence of effete existence. What is effete existence? It's unable to bring anything else into existence. It's effete. It's arid. It's insipid. It's non-creative. But that's certainly not what akala is. That is eternity. However, its absence is that of effete existence. Akasha is unobstructed space, the infinity of unobstructed space. Just as a reminder, it is not infinitude. It is not an infinitude of finite things. It is infinity. That is, it is non-finite. Space, as it is understood as akasha, is the complete emptiness of obstruction. So it is always there. In the same way that archaeus, that is the totality, these are all the potentialities that being has. And shunya is the emptiness. It's a lack of inherent existence. That is, there is nothing that is permanent, partless, or independent. Everything is interdependent and relative. Everything depends for its productivity upon conditions and causes that allow productivity to occur. The productivity that does occur is when we move into the realm of the nature of reality. And now, this is where people living under the conditions of avidya, that is, where you not only don't know about reality, but you're disguising reality all the time by replacing it with a false image. In other words, you're always giving yourself either an unconscious explanation or a conscious rationalization of why you think the world is the way it is. Aletheia are the particulars of what is called Prakriti. Prakriti in Hindu philosophy, in its pure state, is undifferentiated being, matter. It's before matter gets measured, before matter becomes Maya. Maya, mother, measure, all of it, meter, all of it refers to breaking up undivided being into divisible, manifest forms. Morpha, if you will. Morph is what? It means a change. It's a form. It's a changing form. Quite frankly, it's the existence in the world. This is a morpha. That is a morpha. This is a morpha. It's a form. And I use the idea of form because I could have said body, like rupa. Sanskrit, rupa, form, body, in one of its meanings. But I don't. And the reason I don't is because you inhabit many bodies, and every one of them is a set of your morpha. You can't operate in any world, including the emotional world or the mental world, without morpha, without a body. The body that you call when you're using your mentality, you call that body intelligence. When you're using your feelings, you call it sentience. When you're using your will, it's conscience. And when you feel the pure power of life, that's vivacience. And here, in Aletheia, besides the morphas, the existence in the world, you have in time, and you'll see this related, right? Here's timelessness of Akala. Well, here, these become the events in time, the episodes. You want to explain reality, you not only have these morpha, but there are the morpha are in episodes, aren't they now? And they're also what? They're chimeras. What is a chimera? In Greek mythology, a chimera is a beast that is a composite of many different forms. So it might be the head of a giraffe and the body of a lion with the wings of a bird and the tail of a snake, whatever you want to put together. But you see, you look around you, you listen to whatever you like, you smell whatever, and they are all chimeras. They are all appearances that occur where? They occur within kasha, not akasha. When akasha becomes kasha, that is, when it's bounded space, then the chimeras appear as elements in space, right? Each one of these are a different element in the space that appears to your mind via your visual sensations. However, all of these elements, all of these particulars in space that also have a participation as within an episode, right? I mean, what's going on right here? There's a lot of chimeras that are occurring within an episode, right? And the whole thing is the morpha. The whole thing is taking form, and it's got different forms to it, such as the last two forms that we're talking about are archetypes. That is, you know this is a pointer, and that this is not a laser pointer. Well, what differentiates those two are types, right? One type is a light pointer, and the other is a metal mechanical pointer, and each of those are a type. And they're based on an archetype, if you will. They're both pointers. And you see, archetypes are simply this: genus and species. One thing can be categorized under another. For instance, this bottled water can be classified under bottled liquids, right? It's one of many, but this happens to be water. And of all kinds of waters, this is a particular type of water, and it would be subcategorized as a particular type of water. Yet all the liquids together and all the bottles together you could subsume under a larger category, right? Such as containers, and then bottles of water, bottles of alcohol, bottles of juice, all are subsumed under containers. And on and on and on it goes. Well, this is the nature of archetypes, and they all emerge from the archaeus, from the totality of potentiality. From that potential, that reservoir of potentiality and pure being, you have emerged through the forms, through the archetypes. You have these essences in the entities. In fact, that's what defines the entities, by the different forms or essences that go into their composition. So, the last in that series is, how do you get to these morphas that occur as chimeras in episodes that are formed by archetypes, except through causation? And I don't put cause here, I put catena, because understand a catena presupposes cause and effect. That's one way you can look at it, right? And that's a binary way of looking at causation. You say there's a cause and that it has effect, right? Cause effect. Right. The cause is the effect. However, you could look at it three-dimensionally as well. And you could say, well, you know, you have the conditions before the actual moment occurs in which something is produced. And then you're going to have effects afterwards, ripples, ramifications. But right at the moment where the cause meets the effect, there is a transcendence of both, right? Because you can't have just a cause without an effect. You have a transcendence of both when they're both comprehended within a larger phenomenon, which we call catena. That is, it's a series. You can't have a series unless there are the particulars within that series. And so that refers to the catenas of aletheia. Now let's go to our other dimension, our other quadrant, because this is the quadrant by which this gets turned into this. How do you get from eternity, which is timelessness, into time, where there are episodes, for instance? Let's take that one. That's a good one. Well, not only am I going to say that there's a conscious being that's involved in that process, and I'm not saying a conscious being on our level where we have an epistemic relation to everything around there, and I go, well, I'm the subject and everything else is the object. That's not what I'm talking about. Conscious being is much more than that. It is all of this, and depths of which, through the 10 dimensions of the empiric self, we've discovered has very many layers. And it is involved as part of parousia. Ousia is prakriti. It is matter, if you will. It's what is measured or capable of being measured. If it's prime materia, if it's primal matter, there's no differentiation, it's pure being. When you start to divide it up into its partitions, you start to partition it off into finite bounded things. That happens because, if you will, the introduction of the ingredient known as nothingness. Nothingness in its 5 aspects or nullities are absolute, that is radical non-being. It's as I said before, Before being can be, there must of necessity be nothing before. Nothing. Being cannot be if there is something else in its way. Being can't have being without nothingness. It is being and nothingness. And nothingness is what conscious being uses like a good magician in order to fabricate our visible, manifest, alethic world out of the aperionic world of immeasurability, of infinity. And it does so by having the absolute, that is the radical non-being, co-founded with pure being, as well as these other quadrants, in order to create reality through these four ingredients. So, what are the other aspects to the ingredients of non-being, or abhava? Well, first is a priori non-being. A priori non-being is simply this. There are certain things which is logically contradictory, and they will never ever occur. So this kind of non-being can best be exemplified in saying, well, let's take a typical example that's used in Buddhist epistemology. Here's horns of a rabbit. I was going to say ears of a rabbit. The horns of a rabbit. There will never be a rabbit with horns. It's impossible to define a rabbit, which necessarily has ears, as one which has horns. So by definition, you can never have a rabbit with horns. So that's an example of a logical contradiction, and that is what is a priori asat, or sat is being, and asat is the negation of that in Sanskrit. So a priori asat, that means it can't happen logically. So that's one kind of non-existence. So by defining me as a human being, it's going to be impossible to also incorporate in the definition of me as a human being wings. If you have winged human beings in the future, either bionically or biologically evolved, way in the distant future, well, that would be a different species of human beings, and we'd have a broadened category because we now have a winged human being. However, that's in terms of facts, right? We're talking about what could be. Well, let's look at what is. That's antithetical asat, or non-being. For instance, it's mutual. The very fact that this is not the bottle of water or a page that's being presented, or the camera, or any of my fingers, it's quite different from all of this. It has mutual non-being. Not only does that ensure the integrity of this pen as not being anything else is not anything else other than it is. So there's a lot of not being of the antithetical order that is packed into every fact of existence. So that's antithetical being. And then the other two relate to time. One is antecedent non-being, and the other is annihilative non-being. And we can best think of that in terms of an example where I can say to you, all right, I'll give you an example of antecedent non-being. Before this particular page was printed off, it didn't exist. It had non-being. Now, if you look at this page and you go, well, when did its non-being start? Well, it never had a beginning. The non-being of this page never had a beginning. As antecedent non-being, that ceased the moment this page came into existence. When this page came into existence, everything that was antecedent to it where it had not been in existence is what we call antecedent non-being. Now it exists, right? How long will it exist? When the page goes out of existence, it is annihilative non-being. The page no longer exists, right? There are pieces of the page. It's been transformed. It's been changed. Now, does its annihilative non-being have an end? No. It has a beginning, right? You knew, you saw, just when I tore that page up. So the annihilative asad or non-being had a beginning, but it has no end. This disappoints a lot of people who are looking for a body to come back of a missed one. They may hope for it in terms of a resurrection, or they may pray for it in terms of an instant return. However, once a morpha has went out of existence in the form of annihilative non-being, it has no end. The page is not coming back. Now, I could tape the page together, and it would be a facsimile or a recreation of the page that I had before, but it is not that same page. That same page went through an episode, didn't it now? An episode of destruction. Now look at antecedent non-being. Antecedent non-being, that is before this page, no, I'm not going to tear another one up. Before this page came into existence, there was that antecedent non-being. It didn't have a beginning, but it definitely had an end. When this came into existence, antecedent non-being discontinued. Now you're starting to see the way that the particulars within this world we experience as the empiric self come into being and leave being through absences and presences. There are things present, and there are things absent. And the only way you get to something is to say, well, something is not just being, or finite being, or even conscious being, but that something contains nothing. That's part of its recipe, and there's no getting away from it. So, if we were to look very quickly at these various aspects, let's take a quick look at irreality. And I'm going to go over this just very quickly with you, because it is of the nature of change to understand these various components so quickly. Irreality, or Atman, in the Greek tradition called nous, consciousness. The center is the self. I use the term ipsietis. Now, again, it's a neologism. I'm bridging traditions and preparing for an emergence of a omniphilosophy. So, ipsietis, which is basically identity, individuality. Then we have nisus, which is, of course, you can think of it as conscious. That's your will and intending. We've been over this many times before. Cognosis, which is mind and thinking, your intelligence. Then, of course, ethesis. I have cognosis here. Esthesis. Esthesis is just, it's feeling, basic feeling. It isn't an emotion. It isn't just a tactile sensation. It isn't a feeling of discontent or anxiety. It is just feeling. Basic, pure ability to feel. And that's what we refer to as the heart or as love, because we will see that ability to feel is not just an ability. It is actually, if you will, a substance or a vibration, like all of these. Just as the substance of vibration that we call life, or vivus in my neologistic reformulation, is and vivacious. So here we have basically will, mind, love, and life of the self. Now, when we take a look at trans-reality, the next of the quadrants, the apeiron, or apeiron as I prefer, the boundless, we have, let's make sure that we have the latest and the greatest. Okay. So, this should actually be Akala, not Alea. Akala. That's timelessness and eternity. Just as Akasha, spacelessness and infinality. Eternality. I utilize those terms sometimes to call attention to the fact that in infinity, the way that it is used technically in Omni philosophy is not an infinitude of finite particular beings. However well ordered, however classified, however set within sets. Then we have archaeus, which is entitylessness. It is the totality of everything as potential without defining these as particulars. And shunya, or emptiness, is purity. There is absolutely nothing in reality other than. There is nothing in being other than being. That is the purity of being. In cis reality, which is the bounded aletheia, we've spoken that we have morphos, which is the composite of episodes, chimeras, archetypes, and catenas. And we can basically look at these as times, spaces, entities, and causes, provided that you don't just look at causes as what was previous to an effect. The causes is the catena. It's the whole knot. And these are represented in particular space, of course, as energies, the essences, right? The essences, we won't get into the technical philosophical distinctions or how essences are different than universals and how universals exist, whether within the mind or whether they have an independent objective existence that you only see occasionally, for instance, in contemplation or in deep mathematics speculation, etc. We won't enter into that. We will simply say that in terms of the essences, they are what make the particular things, the distinctive things they are, by being all the other things that they are. I mean, for instance, you can have a microwave, but it can be a white microwave or a black microwave and maybe a silver microwave, whatever microwaves that are in fashion this season. However, all those microwaves themselves share an essential features, don't they? And that's what we're talking about with essences. All right, then when it comes to our wonderful D-reality, abhava, the void, which we've mentioned, there's absolute asat, absolute non-being, which is necessary for there to be ontos or being at all. Right? Because ontos is the absence of non-existence. So, the absence of non-existence, of course, infers that there is non-existence, and that is the absolute asat. That is the nothingness of nothing. And then we have, as we mentioned, the a priori, or the contradictory not being. That's logical non-existence, just as with the antithetical asat, you have essences, and you can't possibly have two essences occupying the same thing at the same time. I can't have water in here, and at the same time it's Coca-Cola, or that it could be guava juice. It doesn't matter. it has the essence of water. And then we spoke of the other two in terms of the antecedent and the annihilative asats, the types of non-beings, the absences, one being prior and one being subsequent to anything that does exist, right? So you've got in anything that exists a very curious mixture of, first of all, it couldn't have being unless there was an absolute non-being that, if you will, allowed it to be. And a priori, you can't have contradictory being. This can't both be a bottle and not be a bottle at the same time. It's either a or not a, right, logically. And so that's a priori a sod or non-being, in which what we're saying is that this can't possibly be anything else other than it is. That would be a contradiction. Antithetical asat is bringing out those factual empirical differences. This is not made of metal, this is not made of wood, etc., etc., etc. There are a lot of knots into any factual thing. So what we're looking at here already is there is that ontological basis of nothingness, right here underscoring this bottle, plus there is a lot of contradictions that are eliminated and therefore ontologically innate in defining what this bottle is before it even becomes a bottle of water. And then when it does become a bottle of water, it can only be that bottle of water because it's not everything else that isn't that bottle of water. And then, of course, we talked about the two elements related to time and how before this bottle of water that had an antecedent non-existence of which there was no beginning, and it ended, the antecedent non-existence ended the moment this bottle of water was manufactured at the plant. And when I'm done drinking it, it'll no longer be a bottle of water, it'll be an empty bottle. And so technically, the morphos, the bottle of water, will have disappeared, leaving only the bottle. Where the water went, everyone's going to speculate, but in all probability, it's going to enter into my body, in which it's going to be processed, and then converted and changed, etc., etc. So those morphic elements will undergo further metamorphosis, the realm of change, which we are going to refer to right now. So, in this grand scheme of things in which, as we spoke of, there are the four quadrants that constitute the aeon, we have aeonal being, reality, and existence, where this core, right here from here to here, this axis, is conscious being, pure being, absolute non-being, and partite being. All of these are represented along that spectrum as co-founded together. Now, I've referred before to the cosm. You've heard of the microcosm and the macrocosm. As above, so below, right? As below, so above. As it says in the Recognition Sutras, Sutra 3, the individual conscious being, as a contraction of pure consciousness, is the entire universe in microcosmic form. So we're very used to the idea of the macrocosm of the whole being represented, if you will, in miniature as each self. Well, that's the idea of the cosm. There's the big cosm, there's the little cosm. But then there's, remember, me as a cosm, as a microcosm, and composed of many subcosms. These I call minicosms. The minicosms of which my body is composed, even my emotions and my thoughts are all composed of minicosms. I mean, every thought that is put together, think of it as a kind of building, it has different components to it, different elements to it. In the space, mental space granted, it is not this three-dimensional space of the macroscopic world. The macroscopic world is the world that we can see unaided, right? It's the objects I see before my unaided eye. The microscopic world is the world in which I need a microscope to look at it. It's so small. And if you want to, the telescopic world is the world that is so large and so far away, I have to bring it within the purview of my sight through amplification of very ingenious technical devices, telescopes. All right. So, any of those cosm that I was referring to previously here are at the core of the macrocosm of the whole, the universe, the microcosm, you, part of the universe, and the minicosms, the many minicosms, the zillions of minicosms that constitute the bodies in which you operate within the realm of existence, the realm of morphos, the realm where you are interacting with the environment in an ecologue. An ecologue or an ecologue is a dialogue that's taking place constantly between you and your environment, whether you know it or not. And that's on the bodily frontier, the vital frontier with your energies, the emotional frontier with your feelings and your emotions and the imagination, as well as the other higher aspects of your concrete mind that deals with practical affairs and theoretical propositions and formulas and considerations, and abstract realms, which are entirely of mental. And there are higher realms after that. However, they all have to do with the four elements that we spoke of before: willing, thinking, doing, and feeling. So, in terms of aeonal being, reality, and existence, we're actually talking about conscious being, pure being, absolute non-being, and part-type being. All of these being able to be represented at any point along our octahedron, and each of them makes, if you will, a different level of dimensional density. I've represented that before in this ontography of dimensionalized existence, where if you're looking at that octahedron with all these aspects to them, they fall out, if you will, much like a specific gravity in this octahedron, which, remember, is my mandala of this entire cosmic space. That's what a mandala is, right? You're taking figures, geometric, as well as colors and shapes and whatever else that you can fit into a circle or a sphere as symbolic of the cosmos we inhabit. And you notice I use the word cosm deliberately to reflect, if you will, the cosmos in microcosmic form. However, as we were speaking of it before, it can actually occur from the angle of macrocosm, microcosm, or minicosm. Remember this: the macrocosm includes not just all of us microcosms, but all of the minicosms that compose the bodies, if you will, the instruments by which we, as selves, epistic selves particularly, view the world and divide it up. However, here, let's take a look at reality. The universe as a whole. This is the holos. And this is an important concept. The holos is the universe. It's everything that actually does exist on all its dimensional planes. If you're speaking of a multiverse, you are speaking of something which is different. We will go into that at another point. And a multiverse is a universe in which we do not inhabit. However, we can make reference to, because of, if you will, our compossibility counterparts that allow us to reference imaginatively and intelligibly there being another universe, a counterpart to our own, but ever slightly so different in some respect or another. However, that's a theoretical matter that we'll deal with on another time, but you have to understand that there's not just a universe and not just these compossible multiverses, but there is, if you will, the paraverse. The paraverse is what includes everything. It's pure potentiality. It has absolutely no bounds on it whatsoever. It is inexhaustible. It is beyond understanding and possibility. Where the holos, a universe, everything that we could possibly understand that does exist, that we are causally involved with, you see, it's the key, right? The universe are all the things, all the entities that we are causally involved with, the space-time continuum. The entity, causes, space-time continuum, this whole system is the holos. It's the universe. And so all of that is here. Whatever the cosm within the universe. All right, let's take Plotinus. God is an infinite circle with its circumference nowhere and its center everywhere. It's been said a number of different ways, but that's one of Plotinus's, who originated the concept of the aeon, explained it. And so what we're dealing with here is whatever cosm you have, you're going to have all these elements together. And what I've done is I've conveniently taken what was put in tablature form here, right? Conscious being, impartite being, finite being, and non-being. And I've listed them here. And I've divided them up so that we have here is will, eternity, annihilative, asat, and events. They're all neatly configured, just like mind, infinity, a priori, asset, and the elements. You're going to notice something, that mind and infinity, will and eternity, life and purity, love and totality, those refer to pure being. I had indicated that in another way we could point it out. We take a quick look here at the ontogenetic triunity. We're talking about ontos, sunya, akala, akasha, and archaeus. These elements here of, you see it, the octahedron. And I've related that, of course, ontos to morphos. You see the omniversal model where the point, the aeon, expands, filling all of reality. That is what paratantric triloka is referring to, the three worlds. The upper world here of the formless, arupa realm of ontos, akala, akasha, archaeus, and shunya. Right? You'll remember that that relates to the anosic self, the unitive self that we went into on other diagrams, and I referred to it as the spiritual self or the anosic self. Just as the form realm, the rupa realm, as it is in Sanskrit, of morpha episodes, chimera, archetypes, and katana, is all in this lower pyramid. The desire realm, according to Buddhist cosmology with the triloka, the three worlds, right? The desire realm in which we are inhabiting here. In this realm, all of these things come about as the morpha and ontos we experience as things. We experience timelessness and the episodes as times, do we not? We experience, and I call them tokens, types and tokens after Bertrand Russell. The types relate to, of course, archeus and the archetypes, to the essences, right? The types as forms become felt forms here as chimeras. As chimeras, they are particular feelings. They are particular ideas. They are particular doings, particular expressions. So, a type, when it instantiates, it becomes a token. It becomes an element. It becomes a particular, right? So, if you will, the concept or the archetype of redness, becomes an actual red cloth, tablecloth, a red sweater, etc. So this desire realm, this form realm, and this formless realm all together create synergia. They create everything working together in harmony. And here we're relating that harmony as reality. And all of this as the ingredients of reality manifest in the moment as existence. This is the existential moment. We called it last time the eternal now. It's the existential moment. It's all that is. It's all that will ever be. It's all that has ever been. We can refer chronologically according to our conceptual map that reaches mentally into a non-existent past, right? And talk about the dinosaurs. Oh, the dinosaurs lived here. We've got fossils, etc. Well, that's what we got right now. We got fossils. That's what's going on right here now. That's what's here. This is that. And that's all that will ever be. And reality unfolds itself within this existential moment. It does so for us at this particular level through our various dimensions of the epistic and gnostic and empiric self. And each of them are correlated in terms of the dimensionality. However, when we're talking about change in our lives, personal transformation, of which this whole series, the seminar itself, has been about, we're speaking about controlled change. So once again, we're back to the changer, which is the conscious being that's in a position where they are able to change their environment, to transform it, that is, to enrich it, rather than cisform it, that is, to debilitate it. Cis formations are those frozen, frigid patterns of thought and feeling and action and intending that limit your participation in the existential moment. You're not a dinosaur. You're here now. Remember this, on this planet, 99% of all the species that ever existed in the eternal now are gone. The 1% that does exist is coexisting by way of a fourfold formula of reality, a recipe for existence in which we all participate. So, what I'd like to do is wrap up today's session by speaking about step 6, which is attending to change. And since it is so absolutely crucial to understand change within the context of the melding, the mixing, the merging, and the emergence of these 4 ingredients to reality, I think it is best that we understand, and let's keep our recipe of reality there. It's important to understand that we can notice more about the nature of transformation and self-transformation by paying attention to the nature of change within this existential moment of the eternal now. So, let's do step number 6. Remember, and these are self-transformational evolving practices. And this, number 6, is attending to change. And it's really in 2 parts. You're going to do part of it in sitting meditation, then part of it in walking meditation, or your meditation that's involved in paying attention as you execute your everyday activities in your normal waking consciousness. So with the first, part 1, sitting meditation, sit comfortably, prepare to meditate, call yourself to purpose through the awakening mantra, I am conscious of being conscious. Whatever you're conscious of, now you're conscious of it. That's the door. Step through. Pay full attention to your thoughts. Simply watch them without distraction. Distraction can come for a million reasons. Remember this, it is inattention that allows passive imagination to recreate reality in images over which you have no awareness whatsoever. They're all subliminal. They're all happening behind the stage. And you, every once in a while, look on the screen of your imagination and you go, all right, back to meditation, right? My mind has wandered. It can be excited, it can move away, or it can become dull and you start to fall asleep. Somnolent. You become somnolent. All right. So you don't want to become somnolent, and you don't want to become overexcited. You don't want to become distracted. So you simply want to attend to what's going on in your thoughts. That's all. You don't want to make anything happen. All right. As they arise, notice the 4 ingredients to the recipe of reality. So regarding, first of all, finite being, what thought particulars, that is the contents of your thought, have changed or are changing? Next, after you've noted that, regarding infinite being, what universals, that is, what forms have not changed? What has endured? Next, in terms of definite being, what absence or nullities arose and which were left behind? Fourthly, regarding conscious being, what did you do to change, that is, to transform or to cisform any of the aforementioned? And ask yourself, what didn't you do? First of all, what did you do to bring about transformation or cisformation, that is, either moving forward and expanding or constricting and freezing your forms? What did you do that contributed to those particular and universal and nullified things that are going on in your thoughts? And then, what didn't you do? What didn't you do in order to make an absence happen? And then part 2, when you're done with your sitting meditation and you're going about your daily routine, it's a perfect opportunity to take a look at the recipe of reality and the ingredients that are making themselves appear or disappear. So, call yourself to purpose with the awakening mantra as you're operating, as even I would do now. I'm conscious of being conscious of talking to you. Notice what you are doing. All right. Whatever you're doing. I'm paying attention now to what I'm doing. All right. Notice what you're doing. And the coming and going of finite things in your environment, including your action. Number 7, as these events arise with their particulars, attending to the changing nature of your experience in the world and how everything you undergo is a concoction of the ingredients of the recipe of reality you mix into your crucible of experience, whether you're aware of it or not. This is going to make you much more sensitive to being aware of it, and then you're going to carry that over into your waking daily routines in order to pay attention to these 4 ingredients and how partite being is definitized by the various absences. And then, as the magus, as the one who is in control of all this, you understand what are the ingredients to change. You are aware of the recipe of reality that you can follow in order to mix your ingredients to your satisfaction. So, number 8, as the changer, what do you wish to make present while making absences? Ask yourself that throughout the day in the various contexts you find yourself. So, the next time we are going to be considering something a little more less metaphysical. We today spoke of the source of transformation, but having looked at the nature of change according to the fourfold recipe of reality, in our next presentation in this seminar itself, we're going to take a good, hard look at the choice of self-transformation. So, until that time, behave when you must. Be good whenever you can. But above all else, be yourself.